Okay, so before we get to the Gemara, I'm going to share something which is a little bit exciting, actually. So I have here is newly discovered edited talk by the Rebbe, which is very exciting. In honor of 25 years ago, Tamuz. I don't know where they discovered it. It's not every day, but it happens every now and again where they discover a manuscript and they see there was handwriting on it, and they began editing the talk, and it just never got published as an edited talk.
So the Rebbe edited it?
Yes, that's correct. It's edited by the Rebbe, and they're showing in the back. You can see pictures of the Rebbe's. In the back here, you can see pictures of the Rebbe's handwritten notes. That's what it would look like. The Rebbe's edits. You see that? That's a copy of the Rebbe's edits. So they write in the introduction that it would seem that it wasn't published because there are instances where, like, the Rebbe writes a footnote, a source, but the Rebbe doesn't complete the source, leaves a blank space. So it wasn't completely edited. Here you can see they're editing the actual text. So here's an example. You okay, Yosef?
Yeah.
Here's an example of. So they put a source here and then left in empty brackets to put the actual citation. They wrote like Ben comes from the language of binyan, empty parentheses. They were going to put a source for that idea, and then another source, Rashi, Bereshis, Hey Chav Ches. So they can tell that it wasn't completely fully edited, but it's very, very much edited. So when such a thing happens, it's very exciting. You get a new Torah from the Rebbe. Anyway, so I'll share something from it.
Where did you find this?
These manuscripts?
After 25 years, you would think they would have found everything by now.
I assume they find this in the Rebbe's library. They publish every now and again. They recently published a new Maimon from the Alter Rebbe they never had before. They find a manuscript. The Frierdiker came to America, and they came to America with hundreds and hundreds of pages of manuscripts, and there are still more hundreds still stuck in Russia. And they go through them, and they slowly start to find. They find a manuscript from the Alter Rebbe's brother, where he wrote down a mimer that the Alter Rebbe said at the dinner table. Yeah. Things like that. And here they also find. They assume it's in the Rebbe's library. They slowly go through these manuscripts, and they find a talk the Rebbe gave to women, a women's convention in 1972. They began editing it, and it stayed there, and that was it. So it's an exciting thing when these things get published. So this talk is given on ROSH CHODESH 7. It's a convention leading up to Shavuos. So the bulk of it actually, not even about, well, I guess the overarching theme obviously is the giving of the Torah, because the talk was delivered on ROSH CHODESH. A good chunk of it talks about ROSH CHODESH. So today's ROSH CHODESH, I figured would be a good opportunity to share some of that. So that begins with this idea. Of course, why is it called ROSH CHODESH? The word Chodesh comes from, which we translate as month, comes from the word Chodesh, new. And Rosh, head or beginning, it's the beginning of the renewal. Beginning of the renewal of the moon. It's the simple meaning. The moon waxes and wanes. Obviously, it always has the same amount of light reflected from the sun, but to our appearances, it waxes and wanes, and every 29 and a half days, the moon renews itself. Now, we all know, of course, that the Jews our calendar follows the moon, and Umeis Mon and Lachama, secular calendar follows the sun. And the question becomes why? If the light of the sun is observably and in reality much greater than the light of the moon, why would the Jews count from the moon? So that explains that although the sun has more quantity, that's what they're, it's like in Yiddish phonetics, quantity, more quantity of light, but there's one virtue that the moon has that the sun does not, and that's what makes it unique to Jew people, and namely growth. The sun is static. It's always the same amount of light, winter, summer, day, night, even technically speaking. It's always the same amount of light. Whereas the moon, as you just finished saying, it waxes away, so it has this idea of growth. And because it has this idea of growth, therefore, when it comes to the sun, and the year of the sun, it doesn't. It's not a Shana Chodesh. or the language chodesh, the language of new, which is the word chodesh. The word chodesh, which means month, comes from the word new. That word does not apply to the moon, to the sun's cycle. It just came back to the same point, and then it keeps on going. In fact, that doesn't say this, but in fact, the point at which you make New Year's when you follow the sun is completely arbitrary. You're just counting every 365 and a quarter days. I think it is right. It's a quarter. 365 and a quarter days. It's back at the same point where it was. So pick any point where the sun is, count 365 and a quarter days, and we'll be back at that point, and you can make that New Year's. It's completely arbitrary, and therefore there's no new. It's just a repetition. Whereas the moon, every month, it's a chodesh. It's a new renewal. And that's the definition of growth. The real definition of growth is that there's a constant renewal and constant change. And therefore the Rebbe says as follows, and this is a beautiful thing. Even when the moon is becoming smaller in its appearances, it's part and parcel of not its downfall, but its virtue. The sun is recouping, so to speak, its energy to be renewed later. And likewise by a Jew, the Rebbe says, even a Jew who in appearances, it would seem like he is on a downturn in his service of Hashem. It's merely only on the surface, and it's only a renewal so that it's only a time that he's on down to regain his energy so he can be renewed in his service of Hashem. It's beautiful. That was turning the what we usually refer to as a defect is the
Diminution.
Yeah, even in Jewish literature, it's a defect. It's a Milia Halavana. It's Kabbalistic language. Of course, it's talk about the lack of the moon, and when Mashiach comes, we're going to restore the moon to its former glory. We describe it as a lack, as a negative. And here they were saying the negative is not a defect; it's a feature. A feature of the moon is that sometimes it goes down and sometimes it goes up. It's because that's the nature of growth. Up, down, and therefore the fact that it sometimes goes down, and it's true it's a down, but that down in its true depth is part and parcel of the growth. And even the Jew's time when he's on his downturn can and should be part of his growth and not seen as a negative feature, but as a negative defect, but rather as a feature, as part of his experience as a Jew. He's constantly being renewed and constantly growing, constantly gaining.
That's part of the bittul, maybe.
Sorry?
It's also kind of the diminution of this kind of
There's a bittul.
Like, could also be a bittul.
Yeah, classically speaking, we say that the reason why we count by the moon is because the moon is batel, because it reflects the light of the sun as opposed to having its own light. Which there wasn't talk about that in this talk, which is interesting because, and the reason is because they was comparing it to the fact that the non-Jews count to the sun. In other words, when we say that the moon is batel because it reflects the light of the sun, then in that model, the sun is a parable for Hashem, and then the moon, the Jewish people, will reflect the sun. But if we're going to talk about who counts to which celestial body, and the non-Jews count to the sun, then this parable doesn't really work because we're not reflecting the light of the non-Jews. That's not why we're counting to the moon. So we have to look at each of them individually as separate entities and the light that they produce and why it is the Jews count to the moon. And this is the Rebbe's explanation. It's a beautiful idea. It's actually a talk to women. The book goes on to talk about the women receive the Torah first, and this whole idea of growth is specifically to them, building a home and helping children grow, etc. A very beautiful talk. But anyway, so it's Rosh Chodesh, and the talk was given on Rosh Chodesh. It's a new talk, so I figured I'd share at least that part of the content with you. It's very geschmack, yeah.